Navy officer and King's Guard salute each other. He stepped out of the official vehicle and adjusted his uniform with calm, practiced movements. His uniform was clean and sharp, showing years of discipline and respect for duty. He had traveled far from the sea, far from the sound of waves and engines to attend this international ceremony. Though his face looked steady, his mind was full of thoughts. He had served in the Navy for many years. He had seen calm waters and violent storms. He had stood watch during long nights when the sea felt endless and silent. He had learned to stay strong even when tired, even when afraid. Standing here now, on land that belonged to kings and history, felt very different. Yet something about this place reminded him of duty in a deeper way. As he walked toward the palace grounds, he noticed the tall stone walls, old and strong, built centuries ago. Guards stood at the gates, unmoving, their posture perfect. They wore traditional uniforms that looked heavy with history. These were not just soldiers. They were symbols of a nation's past and pride. The officer slowed his steps without realizing it. He felt respect growing inside him. One guard, in particular, caught his attention. The King's Guard stood straight, eyes forward, hands steady. His face was calm, showing no emotion, yet there was strength in his stillness. The guard had been standing there since sunrise, trained to remain motionless no matter what happened around him. His duty was clear: protect, represent, and honor the crown. The naval officer looked at the guard for a moment longer than necessary. He wondered about the man's life. He imagined years of training, strict rules, and heavy responsibility. The guard did not travel across oceans, but his duty was no less demanding. Protecting a royal family and standing as a living symbol of tradition carried its own weight. As the officer continued walking, memories from his own life came back to him. He remembered the first day he joined the Navy, young and nervous, trying to stand straight in his uniform. He remembered his instructors teaching him about respect, not only for rank, but for service itself. He remembered saluting his seniors, learning that a salute was more than a gesture. It was a sign of trust, responsibility, and shared values. The palace courtyard slowly filled with people. Officials from different countries arrived, speaking in low voices. Cameras were set up and flags were placed carefully. The event would be formal and serious, filled with speeches and traditions. Yet the officer felt that the most important moments were often quiet ones, unseen by many. The King's Guard remained still, but inside his mind, thoughts moved like slow waves. He had grown up hearing stories about honor and loyalty. His family had served the crown for generations. When he was chosen for the Guard, he felt pride but also pressure. Every movement, every breath had to be controlled. He was trained to notice everything while showing nothing. He noticed the naval officer approaching. He could see the foreign uniform, the medals, the calm walk of someone used to command and responsibility. The guard understood this man was not ordinary. Though they came from different lands, their paths were shaped by discipline and service. The guard felt a quiet respect, even though his face remained unchanged. The officer now realized he would pass directly in front of the guard. His steps slowed slightly. He knew there were rules here, traditions older than his own country's navy. He wondered if it would be wrong to acknowledge the guard. He did not want to show disrespect by acting out of place. At the same time, ignoring the guard felt wrong to him. This man represented something noble. His heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from uncertainty. He had saluted many times in his life in ports and on decks during ceremonies and farewells. But this was different. This was not his country, not his command. Still, respect did not belong to one nation alone. The guard sensed the officer's hesitation. Though he could not move his head, he felt the moment growing heavier. He knew the rules clearly. He was not supposed to respond to unexpected gestures. His duty was strict. Yet deep inside, he believed that honor should be recognized when it appears. The officer took another step forward. The distance between them closed. The sounds around them faded in his mind. He remembered something his old captain once said: "True respect is never wrong when it comes from the heart." That thought settled his decision. Just as he came level with the guard, the naval officer raised his hand in a clean, sharp salute. It was not rushed or dramatic. It was calm and full of meaning. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. The world around them continued, but the space between the two men felt quiet and focused. The guard felt a sudden weight in his chest. The salute was unexpected, but it was sincere. It was not meant to challenge or break rules. It was a gesture of equality and service. The guard's training told him to remain still, but his heart told him something else. This moment was rare, and it mattered. For a short second, the guard hesitated. That hesitation was invisible to most people, but to him, it felt long and heavy. Then, with perfect control and respect, he returned the salute. His movement was precise, matching the officer's calm strength. A few people nearby noticed and fell silent. There were no gasps, no loud reactions, just a quiet awareness that something meaningful had happened. Two men from different worlds had acknowledged each other without words. The officer lowered his hand and continued walking, his posture steady. Inside, he felt a warmth he had not expected. It was as if years of service had been silently understood by someone who truly knew what it meant. He did not look back, knowing the moment was complete. The guard returned to stillness, his face once again calm and unreadable. Yet inside, something had changed. He felt seen, not as a statue or symbol, but as a fellow servant of duty. His stance felt stronger, his purpose clearer. The ceremony went on. Speeches were made and flags were raised. But for the officer and the guard, the most important moment had already passed. It was simple, quiet, and deeply human. As the naval officer took his place among the officials, his mind returned briefly to the sea. He knew that when he sailed again, this memory would stay with him. It would remind him that honor exists everywhere, carried by people who serve with heart and discipline. The king's guard stood at his post until the end of his watch. He did not speak of the salute to anyone. He did not need to. The meaning of it was his alone, a reminder that respect needs no language and no shared flag. And so, in a palace filled with history and formality, a small, silent exchange became a powerful beginning, one that showed how two lives, shaped by duty, could meet for a moment and understand each other completely without saying a single word. After the ceremony ended, the palace grounds slowly returned to a calmer rhythm. People moved away in small groups, their voices low and polite. The naval officer stood with other guests, listening to conversations that felt distant to him. His body was present, but his mind kept returning to the moment at the gate. The salute replayed again and again, not as a dramatic act, but as a quiet connection that stayed with him. He excused himself politely and walked toward the edge of the courtyard. The sun had risen higher now, warming the stone paths. He loosened his shoulders slightly, a habit formed during long hours on deck. Though he had attended many formal events before, something about this one felt different. It was not the speeches or the palace. It was the feeling of shared understanding he had not expected to find so far from home. As he walked, he remembered his early days in the Navy more clearly than usual. He remembered being taught how to walk, how to stand, how to speak, and when to stay silent. Back then, he had not fully understood why such small details mattered. Years later, he knew they were the foundation of trust. Every movement showed who you were and what you stood for. Meanwhile, the king's guard remained at his post, as still as ever. To anyone watching, nothing had changed. His posture was perfect, his eyes steady, his face calm. But inside, his thoughts were more active than usual. He replayed the salute in his mind, noticing every detail. The officer's hand had moved with confidence, not pride. It was clear the gesture came from respect, not habit. The guard had trained himself to keep emotions deep inside, hidden even from his own thoughts. Yet this moment had touched something personal. He remembered his own training days, standing for hours under the sun, learning to ignore discomfort. He remembered older guards correcting him quietly, teaching him that being seen was less important than being worthy. He thought of his family. They would never know about this moment. They would see photos of the ceremony, hear official news, but this small exchange would remain unseen. Still, it mattered. It reminded him why he chose this path, why he accepted a life of rules and silence. The naval officer was later invited to a small gathering inside the palace. The room was large but simple, filled with light from tall windows. Art and symbols from the nation's history decorated the walls. As he listened to a host speak about cooperation and shared values, his eyes drifted toward one of the windows that looked out onto the gates. He could not see the guard from there, but he knew the man was still standing, still serving. The officer felt a sense of balance, as if the world was larger yet more connected than he often believed. He realized that service, in any form, created invisible bonds between people who might never speak. During a break, another officer approached him and made a light comment about the ceremony. The naval officer smiled politely but did not mention the salute. He felt that explaining it would reduce its meaning. Some things were not meant to be discussed or shared. They were meant to be carried quietly. Outside, time passed slowly for the king's guard. He measured time not by clocks but by shadows and sounds. He noticed changes in the air, small shifts in light. This awareness was part of his duty. It kept him focused and present. He also noticed how people looked at him differently now. Some had seen the salute. Their looks were not questioning or judgmental but thoughtful. He did not respond. He had returned to his role, and that role required stillness, not reaction. The naval officer eventually stepped outside again, drawn by the need for fresh air. The event was not yet over, but he felt the urge to walk. As he moved along the palace path, he passed near the gates once more. He did not stop or slow down. He did not salute again. That would have changed the meaning of the first moment. Still, he felt the guard's presence, strong and steady. The officer's respect did not fade. If anything, it grew deeper. He realized that respect did not always need expression. Sometimes it lived quietly in the way you carried yourself afterward. Later that afternoon, the naval officer sat alone in a quiet room provided for guests. He removed his cap and rested it beside him. He thought about the long journey ahead, returning to the sea, returning to his crew. He wondered how he would explain this day if asked. He knew he would not describe the salute itself. Instead, he would speak of the feeling it left behind. The guard's shift eventually came to an end. When he was relieved, he moved with careful steps, following procedure. Only when he was alone did he allow himself to breathe a little deeper. His muscles relaxed slightly, but his mind stayed alert. Even off duty, the guard carried his role with him. As he walked through a private corridor, he thought about the naval officer again. He wondered where the man had come from, what waters he had crossed, what storms he had faced. He did not imagine their paths crossing again. That was not important. What mattered was that for a moment, two lives shaped by duty had recognized each other. That evening, the naval officer stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Lights slowly appeared as the sun went down. He could hear distant sounds of life continuing, unchanged by the ceremony. He felt calm. The world felt steady, balanced between past and present. He understood something clearly now. Honor was not tied to rank, uniform, or place. It lived in choices made quietly, often without witnesses. The salute had not been about tradition alone. It had been about seeing another person clearly and choosing respect. The king's guard, resting in his quarters, prepared for the next day. His uniform was carefully placed, every detail neat. He lay back and stared at the ceiling for a moment, allowing his thoughts to settle. Tomorrow would be the same as always. Stand, watch, protect. Yet something inside him felt renewed. Both men in different parts of the palace carried the same quiet lesson. They would return to their routines, their responsibilities, their worlds. No medals would be given for the moment they shared. No record would be written. And that was enough. Because sometimes, the most powerful moments are the ones that pass quietly, leaving behind not noise or attention, but a lasting sense of respect that strengthens the heart and reminds a person why they chose to serve in the first place. The next morning arrived quietly, with soft light touching the palace walls. The city was awake again, moving at its steady pace. Inside the guest quarters, the naval officer rose early, as he always did. Years at sea had trained his body to wake before alarms. He stood by the window for a moment, looking out at the city. The memory of the salute was still with him, not fading as he expected, but settling deeper, like a calm weight. He dressed carefully, pressing his uniform flat, checking every detail. For him, preparation was a form of respect. He knew the day would include more meetings and formal moments, but his mind felt clearer than before. Something had shifted inside him. He felt more grounded, more certain of why he had chosen a life of service. Across the palace, the king's guard began his day in silence. He followed the same routine he had followed for years. Wash, dress, check equipment, prepare the uniform with care. Every step was familiar. Yet as he adjusted his gloves and stood before the mirror, he paused for a brief moment. He did not smile, but his eyes showed calm strength. The memory of the salute returned, steady and quiet. Today there would be another public appearance. Foreign guests would pass through the gates again. The guard knew his role well. Stand firm. Watch carefully. Represent something greater than himself. He accepted this fully. But now, there was an added sense of connection to the wider world beyond the palace walls. The naval officer joined a small group of officials for a scheduled walk through part of the historic grounds. The guide spoke about ancient kings, old treaties, and moments of change. The officer listened with interest, but what caught his attention most was how history was carried by people, not buildings. Traditions survived because people chose to honor them. As they approached the outer section of the grounds, the officer realized they would pass near the same gate as before. His steps remained steady. He felt no nervousness this time, only awareness. He reminded himself that moments should not be forced. What mattered was how one carried respect forward. The king's guard was already at his post. The morning air was cooler and the shadows were long. He stood straight, his presence firm and calm. He noticed the group approaching. Among them he recognized the naval officer instantly, not by face alone but by the way he walked, calm, balanced, purposeful. The officer noticed the guard too. Their eyes did not meet directly, but there was understanding in the space between them. There was no salute this time. There was no need. Both men understood that repeating the gesture would weaken its meaning. Respect, once given, did not need constant display. As the group passed, the officer felt a quiet confidence. He did not slow down or turn his head. Yet inside, he acknowledged the guard again, not with movement but with thought. He hoped the man knew how much the moment had mattered to him. The guard remained still, his focus sharp. Yet his mind was calm. He felt no pressure, no confusion. The earlier uncertainty was gone. He had accepted that respect could exist outside written rules without breaking them. This understanding strengthened his sense of duty rather than weakening it. Later that day, the naval officer attended a meeting with senior representatives. They discussed cooperation, shared responsibility, and future plans. The language was formal, but the message was clear. Different nations, different roles, same purpose: stability, safety, and trust. As he listened, the officer felt the words connect to his recent experience. He understood their meaning more deeply now. During a pause in the meeting, he looked around the room. He saw different uniforms, different styles, different traditions. Yet beneath them all, he recognized the same quiet commitment. The salute at the gate had been a small example of something much larger. The king's guard's day continued with careful focus. He observed crowds, noted small changes, stayed alert. His training guided him through every moment. Yet inside, he felt steady, not tense. The moment with the naval officer had reminded him that his role was not invisible. It was seen and valued, even by those who did not share his uniform. As the sun moved across the sky, the guard reflected on how duty shaped a person. It taught patience. It taught control. But it also taught humility. The salute had not raised him above his role. It had simply reminded him of its meaning. In the afternoon, the naval officer found time to walk alone again. He moved through a quieter section of the grounds, away from the main paths. He thought about his crew waiting back at sea, about the responsibilities that would soon return to him. He knew he would carry this experience back with him, not as a story to tell loudly, but as a lesson to live quietly. He remembered young sailors he had trained. He thought about how he would guide them, not just in skills, but in values. He realized that leadership was not only about command. It was about recognition, knowing when to see another person fully and offer respect without expecting anything in return. The guard's shift ended later than usual. When he was relieved, he followed protocol and moved away from the gate. His steps were measured, his posture unchanged. Only when he was alone did he allow his thoughts to wander again. He considered the naval officer's calm presence. He wondered how many such moments happened in the world each day, unseen and unrecorded. He felt proud, not because he had been noticed, but because he had responded with integrity. That evening, the palace lights came on again. The city settled into night. The naval officer packed some of his belongings, preparing for departure the next day. He paused while folding his uniform, running his hand over the fabric. He felt gratitude, not only for his career, but for the reminder of why it mattered. The king's guard sat quietly in his quarters, maintaining his equipment, preparing for the next day. His routine was unchanged, yet his perspective felt wider. He felt connected to a world beyond the palace walls, to others who carried duty in different forms. Neither man knew what the future would bring. They did not expect their paths to cross again. That did not matter. What mattered was that each had been reminded of the shared ground beneath different traditions. As night deepened, both men rested with calm minds. The salute was no longer a moment of surprise. It had become a quiet anchor, a reminder that respect is strongest when it is sincere, simple, and freely given. And so, the third day passed not with dramatic events but with steady understanding. Two lives continued forward, strengthened by a silent connection that required no words, no recognition, and no reward. Only the knowledge that true honor is shared by those who serve with discipline and heart. The day of departure arrived quietly. The naval officer woke before sunrise, as he often did when preparing to leave a place. The room was still, and the city outside was slowly coming to life. He stood for a moment near the window, breathing in the calm air. There was a sense of closure in his chest, mixed with gratitude. He felt ready to return to the sea, carrying something valuable that could not be packed into a bag. He dressed with care, checking each button and crease. His uniform felt familiar and steady, like an old friend. As he placed his cap on the table, he paused. He thought about the people he had met during his visit, the conversations filled with polite words and formal smiles. Yet one moment stood above all others, clear and quiet, unchanged by time. Down at the palace gates, the king's guard took his position as usual. The morning air was cool and the stones beneath his boots felt solid. He stood straight, eyes forward, fully present. The routine was the same, but his awareness felt sharper. He knew that many visitors would leave today, and the palace would return to its normal rhythm. The guard had learned long ago not to expect meaning from every day. Some days were simply duty, measured by time and stillness. But sometimes, meaning appeared without warning. When it did, it stayed. He did not seek it. He simply accepted it when it came. The naval officer walked through the courtyard one last time, guided by an aide. The path felt familiar now. The walls, the flags, the sound of footsteps on stone, everything carried a sense of calm order. As they approached the gates, the officer felt a gentle pull in his chest. He did not slow his pace. He did not plan anything. He allowed the moment to be what it would be. The king's guard noticed the group approaching. He recognized the naval officer again instantly. The man's presence was steady, his movement controlled. The guard felt no tension this time. There was nothing to decide. The past moment had already done its work. As the officer passed the guard, there was no salute. There was no nod or glance. Yet something invisible passed between them, stronger than before. It was recognition without display, respect without gesture. Both men felt it clearly. The officer stepped beyond the gates and into the waiting vehicle. As the door closed, he allowed himself a slow breath. He felt complete. The visit had given him something unexpected, something that would stay with him long after the palace disappeared from view. The guard remained at his post, still and focused. The vehicle moved away, blending into the city traffic. The guard did not follow it with his eyes. His duty remained here, and he accepted that fully. Later that morning, the palace returned to its usual pace. Fewer guests, quieter halls. The guard continued his watch, marking time by the movement of shadows. His thoughts were calm. He felt no need to hold onto the moment. It had already become part of him. The naval officer's journey back took several hours. As the city faded behind him, he watched the landscape change. Roads gave way to open stretches, and eventually, the familiar smell of salt air returned. When he finally saw the harbor, he felt a deep sense of belonging. He stepped onto the deck of his ship with practiced ease. The sounds of work surrounded him, voices, metal, movement. His crew greeted him with respect. He returned their greetings calmly, feeling grounded. He was back where he belonged. As the ship prepared to depart, the officer stood near the rail and looked out at the water. He thought about the guard once more, standing at his post, watching over a place rich with history. He realized that though their worlds were different, their hearts were aligned by duty. In the days that followed, life at sea resumed its steady rhythm. Watches were kept, tasks completed, decisions made. The officer led with quiet confidence. He found himself more patient, more aware of the people around him. When a young sailor struggled, he offered guidance without harsh words. When effort went unnoticed, he made sure it was seen. The salute had changed him in small but important ways. It reminded him that leadership was built on respect, not authority alone. He carried that lesson forward, shaping the way he spoke, listened, and acted. Back at the palace, the king's guard continued his service. Days passed, each similar to the last. Yet he felt a steady strength inside him. When standing for long hours, he no longer felt unseen. He understood that even silent service carried weight. He noticed small things more clearly now. The way children looked at the guards with curiosity. The way elders nodded slightly as they passed. These moments had always existed, but now he felt them more deeply. One evening, after his shift ended, the guard walked through the quiet corridors of the palace. The walls reflected soft light and the air was still. He felt pride, not loud or dramatic, but calm and steady. He knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. Both men, far apart now, lived their lives with renewed purpose. They did not speak of their shared moment. They did not need to. It lived quietly within them, guiding their actions and thoughts. The naval officer stood on deck one night, stars spread across the sky. The sea was calm, reflecting the light above. He felt at peace. He knew that wherever duty took him next, he would carry respect as his guide. The king's guard stood at his post the next morning, sunlight touching the palace walls. His posture was perfect, his focus sharp. He felt steady and clear. Neither man knew if they would ever cross paths again. That was not important. What mattered was that a simple moment had shaped them both, reminding them that honor is shared by those who serve with sincerity. And so, as time moved forward, their lives continued, separate yet quietly connected, each strengthened by the knowledge that respect, when given freely and received with grace, becomes a lasting force that guides the heart long after the moment has passed. Time moved forward, quietly as it always did. Days became weeks, and weeks slowly turned into months. The naval officer settled fully back into his life at sea. The ship followed its routes across wide waters, stopping at ports and moving on again. The rhythm of duty returned, steady and familiar. Yet something inside him had changed in a way that could not be measured by rank or position. He stood on the deck one early morning, watching the horizon where the sky met the water. The sea was calm, painted with soft colors by the rising sun. Moments like this had always brought him peace, but now they carried a deeper meaning. He felt connected not only to his crew, but to all those who served in their own quiet ways around the world. During daily work, he noticed himself listening more carefully. When sailors spoke, he gave them his full attention. He corrected mistakes with patience instead of sharp words. He remembered how much a small gesture could matter. He understood now that respect, when given honestly, could lift a person's spirit in ways commands never could. One afternoon, a young sailor hesitated before speaking to him. The officer noticed and invited him to talk. The sailor shared worries about living up to expectations. The officer listened, then spoke calmly about duty, effort, and self-respect. He did not mention the palace or the salute, but the lesson behind it shaped his words. The sailor left with renewed confidence, and the officer felt quietly satisfied. Far away, the king's guard continued his service at the palace. Seasons changed around him. The air grew warmer, then cooler again. Visitors came and went. Ceremonies filled some days, while others passed in quiet stillness. Through it all, he remained steady, standing watch with the same calm strength. He noticed that his own thoughts had grown clearer over time. When standing at his post, he felt less burdened by silence. Instead, the quiet became a source of focus and balance. He understood his role more deeply now. He was not only guarding a place, but protecting an idea shaped by history, trust, and responsibility. Occasionally, he saw foreign uniforms pass through the gates. Each one reminded him that duty existed in many forms. He did not compare roles or measure worth. He simply acknowledged within himself the shared discipline that connected them all. One day, a small group of new guards began their training nearby. The king's guard observed them quietly. He saw himself in their careful movements and serious faces. When given the chance, he offered guidance with patience, correcting posture and reminding them of focus. He did not speak loudly. He did not seek attention. His calm presence spoke clearly enough. Months later, the naval officer returned to land for another assignment. This time, the city was different, the setting unfamiliar, yet the lesson he carried remained the same. In meetings and briefings, he noticed how often small acts of respect changed the tone of a room. A nod, a pause to listen, a thoughtful response. These simple choices built trust faster than authority ever could. One evening, after a long day, he sat alone and reflected on his journey. He realized that the salute at the palace had not been an ending or a beginning. It had been a reminder of who he was at his core, beyond uniform and duty. Back at the palace, the king's guard experienced a quiet moment of his own. A child visiting the grounds looked up at him with curiosity and wonder. The child stood still for a moment, then straightened his back, trying to stand just like the guard. The guard did not smile or move, but inside he felt warmth. Without words, he had passed something important forward. Life continued in this gentle way. The naval officer sailed through storms and calm waters alike. The king's guard stood through heat and cold, rain, and clear skies. Each faced challenges known only to those who serve. Each carried responsibility with quiet strength. Neither man ever spoke of the salute again. There was no need. Its meaning lived on through their actions, shaping how they treated others and how they carried themselves. The moment had become part of their character. Years later, the naval officer stood before a group of young officers during a training session. He spoke about leadership, discipline, and respect. He told them that true strength often showed itself in simple gestures. He encouraged them to see people, not just ranks. The words felt honest and true, shaped by experience. At the same time, the king's guard stood at his post as always. His uniform was crisp, his stance perfect. Time had added wisdom, not weight. He felt proud of his service, not because it was noticed, but because it mattered. The world around them changed, as it always would. New challenges arose. New faces appeared, yet the quiet values that guided them remained steady. In the end, their story was not about ceremony or attention. It was about two lives shaped by duty, connected by a single moment of shared respect. A moment that needed no record and no praise. And so, as the naval officer looked out over the sea once more, and the king's guard stood beneath the palace sky, both carried the same truth within them. That honor lives in everyday choices. That respect strengthens both the giver and the receiver. And that sometimes, the simplest gesture can leave the deepest mark, guiding a person for the rest of their life without ever needing to be spoken aloud.